Second.
Thank you. All right. We do have a very full agenda, and we do have a number of things that may have changed since the agenda. So I just want everyone to know how this evening will go. We will start with the discussion items. This is a work session. It is designed to be a back and forth, and it is going to be about some of the environmental issues that we have worked on recently, as well as an overview of the Gobler Water Report and a conversation about Havens Beach. We will then go into an introduction of some laws. We will introduce the Waterways Law, which is the harbor management law. We will not introduce the waterfront overlay law this evening. We will discuss it and we will talk about a calendar, but it will not be put on for an introduction to local law at this time. We then do have a couple of other things on the agenda, including parking and and bamboo, and then some authorizations. Some of our conversation tonight about Havens Beach will talk about the parks law, but that also is not on tonight's agenda. So we'll have discussion about Havens Beach and everything else, but some of that discussion may change the law that we present. So just wanted everyone to be clear as we go into it, what kind of order. So those of you who are interested in the waterways and/or waterfront zoning, I do encourage you to stay for the conversations about the environmental, but it will probably be about an hour in. So with that, I would like to introduce Emily Halleck. Emily is she's just finished a year at Duke, and then she did not go back this year because of the virus. So she became our intern. And Emily, I want to thank you. I know we're coming near the end of your internship. It's not quite all the way, but I have been so impressed by how hard you've worked and how much value you have brought to our village environmentally. So I want to give you a big thank you. And in addition, I want to give you oh my goodness, first of the Green Paver Awards. These are the pavers that are down on Bay Street, and a couple of extras are going to be environmental awards given to people who really made a difference for Sag Harbor Village. And you're the first one. So thank you for all your hard work. And now you're going to take us through the climate smart community. But you're muted. I think you can unmute yourself. No? Yes.
Oh, she was there for a second.
Okay, thank you so much. Wow, I feel so honored. So I'm just going to ask that I can share my screen so that then I can take you guys through some of the work that we've been doing with climate smart communities. All right, perfect. So the last time we met was back in November, and we were still relatively new to the Climate Smart Communities program. We had taken the pledge back in August, but we were still getting on our feet back in November. So I'm here to update you on where we are now, months later. We've done a lot of great work, and I'm really privileged to be able to work with the team I'm working with on Climate Smart Communities. So just as a little bit of an overview and a reminder of what the Climate Smart Communities program is it's a New York State NYSERDA program that is designed to assist local governments in reducing their greenhouse gas emissions and adapting to climate change. So the way that this program works is that it lays out over 100 different planned actions that are each worth a variable amount of points. And municipalities can choose which actions they would like to complete to accumulate points. And ultimately, our goal right now is to accumulate 120 points so that we can receive bronze level certification. And the reason that we want to achieve the certification is not only to reduce our emissions and help adapt Sag Harbor for climate change, but it'll also allow the village to receive better scores on state grant applications, as well as receive public publicity for all of the great environmental work we're doing, And many of the actions also come along with reduced energy usage, which can result in actualized savings for the village as well. So there's a lot of benefits to the program itself. So the last time we spoke in November, we had 13 points out of the required 120 points for certification, but I'm very pleased to announce tonight that we are now more than halfway to our goal. We have 66 of the required 120 points, and a lot of these points have come from projects that the village has either previously undertaken and we're assembling documentation, but it has also come from some new projects as well. So we've established a Climate Smart Communities task force. We've named Marianne Eddy as our coordinator. We've gotten points for solar, our yard waste pickup program, as well as so many other things that we've been doing in the village. So we are well on our way towards certification. And now I'm going to provide you with some updates on previous projects that the village has undertaken so that we can see where they are now. So one big project that the village did back in 2011, 2012 was the solar panels on the fire department. So when we drive past the fire department, we can see that array. It is a 12.32 kilowatt array. And the initial project costs were a little over $58,000, but we were lucky enough to have the majority of it covered through a federal grant. The cost breakdown is shown on the screen here. And the village did pay for a repair on the fuse box back in 2019. But in total, since the installation, the array has saved the village over $16,000 in electricity savings. So as of now, we are in the positives. We have paid off the project through our electricity savings, and we have seen over $3,500 in actualized savings. But in addition, we have generated over 130,000 kilowatt hours of electricity in the past decade, which has reduced our greenhouse gas emissions by over 91 metric tons of carbon dioxide. And it's estimated that for each year for the remainder of the useful life of the panels, the array will generate 14,000 kilowatt hours, and we will see about $1,700 in savings annually. So this project is still saving the village money, and it's a great addition to the village, and we were also able to receive points for Climate Smart Communities. So another project that the village undertook back in August was installing an electric vehicle charging station. So this charging station is available to the public, so both our residents can use the supercharge station as well as any visitors can also utilize the station as well. So we were able to actually receive a rebate to help cover some of the costs of this station. And so now this station can serve as a source of profit for the village, because for every kilowatt hour that is charged on it, the village does receive revenue. So since the installation in August, the charging station has generated a little over $1,700 in profit for the village, and this will continue as the station continues to be used. It's estimated that it'll likely be about $2,500 in profit annually for the village. This is an estimate since we haven't seen it in the summer months, but it's likely that usage will spike then. And on a similar note of the charging station, as a part of Climate Smart Communities, we're also encouraging the village to replace vehicles on an as-needed basis with either plug-in hybrids or electric vehicles if those vehicles are able to perform the required functions that our vehicles need to perform. So one vehicle that's currently up for replacement is the code enforcement vehicle. And looking at what that vehicle is used for, as well as its annual mileage, we've determined that it's very possible and it's a good option to replace the vehicle with a completely electric vehicle. So right now we've been looking at two different options that both fit within the approved budget. One is the Nissan Leaf and the other is the Chevy Bolt. They both fit within the budget and they can perform all of the necessary actions of the vehicle. And looking at the annual mileage of this code enforcement vehicle, it only goes a little over 3,000 miles annually. So based on that, it's likely that either electric vehicle that we would purchase would only need to be charged once a month. And this charging could be done right here at our electric vehicle charging station. It would take a little bit over an hour to charge, and we wouldn't have to worry about filling up with gas, and we're also reducing our greenhouse gas emissions. So that's a really great opportunity that the village can choose to move forward with if they would like. So another part of Climate Smart Communities is establishing the task force. So we have worked really hard with both village officials as well as community members to establish a task force which can help to oversee the work of Climate Smart Communities. So this task force, our members include Tom Gardella, a trustee, Wendy Parent from Village Hall, Molly Bishop and Carol Ostro from the Sag Harbor Partnership, as well as Nat Agosi from the Chamber of Commerce. And Nat is also a registered civil engineer, so that has also been very helpful in understanding some of the interworkings of Climate Smart Communities. And so what this task force is doing is it's pulling together the resources of the village, but also using the skill sets of our community members to work towards achieving our certification. So individual members will work on actions that are of interest to them, and then we will also come together for bi-monthly reports on where we are and working on how we can really maximize our efforts in this road towards certification. So looking ahead to how we are going to achieve our 120 points, we've put together both a short-term and a long-term list of actions that we would like to complete. So in the short term, a really important thing that we've been working on is putting together our government operations greenhouse gas inventory. And so what that will do is it'll allow us to have an all-encompassing view of where our emissions are coming from so that we can then identify how we can lower our greenhouse gas emissions, but also identify the areas in which it's easiest to do so. We're also looking at advanced vehicles, as well as running a Buy Local, Buy Green campaign to promote the purchase of local goods through the farmers markets, seafood shops, all of that. And we have also been looking at adding recycling into government buildings, which Wendy has been very helpful with, as well as the feasibility of adding recycling onto our streets in select locations. And then long-term, these projects are a little bit bigger scope and require a little bit more manpower, but we're looking at an LED streetlight conversion, looking at the possibility of that to see if it's the right fit for the village. We would also like to create a watershed plan for water quality so that we can plan on how to best protect our watersheds. Looking into opportunities such as community choice aggregation, New York Stretch Energy Code, code enforcement training. And then also a big one is at some point, a big part of Climate Smart Communities is planning on how you are going to reduce your emissions in the future. So at some point in the future, the village should sit down and really look at what our emissions are now and how we would like to reduce them and by what amount. And we can set dates for, do we want to do it 5 years out, 10 years out? This is a really important component of Climate Smart Communities. We're not there yet, but it will be coming up in the future. So I've been talking a lot about Climate Smart Communities, but there is a partner program. It's another NYSERDA program that's called Clean Energy Communities. And both of these programs have the same goals of reducing municipality greenhouse gas emissions, but really the main difference is what you're working towards. So with Climate Smart Communities, we're working towards achieving bronze level certification, which will then give us better scores on grant applications. But in Clean Energy Communities, we're working towards achieving $5,000 no match grants. And so between these two programs, there's 11 different overlapping actions. So what we've been trying to do is work towards maximizing our efforts so that we can achieve Climate Smart Communities certification, but we can also work towards achieving grants that we can then use on future environmental projects. So there's 3 ways in which you can achieve or receive a Clean Energy Community grant. The first is a designation grant, and that's for completing 4 of their high impact actions. The second is a point grant, and then the third is an action grant. And specifically for the action grant, we're looking at the possibility of adopting New York Stretch Energy Code. So this is an energy code which is a little more stringent than what we currently have. It's an overlay code. Both the town of Southampton and the town of East Hampton are looking at adopting it as well. So it would create a very cohesive code throughout the East End. And so what this code does is it's slightly more stringent so that we can reduce greenhouse gas emissions a little bit more in both new constructions as well as renovation projects. So the jump from the code that we currently have to New York Stretch, it's not really a big jump. It's actually pretty reasonable. It's just moving a little bit in the positive direction. So examples of how New York Stretch could apply to projects in the community is it may regulate the insulation type and amount a little more so that we can have better insulation in our homes to reduce energy usage. So it's just a little bit of a shift, but if the village explores it and finds that it's a good option for us to adopt, we can then receive a $5,000 grant for doing so. So another future project that we've been looking at is the possibility of an LED streetlight conversion. And I will be talking about this a little bit later with Tom Gardella as well, but just a brief overview is the reason why this is an important action in climate smart communities is that street lighting accounts for a large portion of our electricity bill. So converting to LED would allow us to reduce our electricity consumption for streetlights by 40%, which would ultimately reduce our emissions by almost 64 metric tons of carbon dioxide annually. So it is a project that would allow us to reduce a large amount of our emissions, which is why we're looking at it. So in a lot of the projects that we've either completed or we're looking to complete, there are opportunities to save money. And this really comes from saving electricity. So up to date, some of the savings we've seen is over $3,500 from the solar array on the fire department. And that has also reduced our emissions by 92.1 metric tons of carbon dioxide. And that's total for the last decade or so. And then this isn't really savings, it's revenue, but the electric vehicle charging station has also brought in about $1,700 in savings up to date. So far we've had a little over $5,000 in monetary savings and reduced our emissions by over 92 metric tons of carbon dioxide. And some of the projects that we're looking at will then have future annual savings. So as I stated, the solar will continue to generate about $1,700 in savings, and a little less than 10 metric tons of carbon dioxide will be reduced from our emissions. The electric vehicle charging station will likely bring in more than $2,500 in income. And then for an LED streetlight conversion project, once the project was paid for, the village could see a little over $15,000 in electricity savings. But really that would be reducing our emissions by an additional 64 metric tons of carbon dioxide. So through the work that Climate Smart Communities is doing, there's a lot of opportunity for monetary savings as well. And that's why we're working as hard as we can to find grant opportunities, as well as working within our current budget to find alternatives to what we're currently using. So this concludes the presentation that I've put together, but I would love to answer any questions if anyone has any. All right. I'm not seeing any questions, so thank you.
Thanks, Emily.
Thank you, Emily.
That was great.
Thank you.
Kathleen is muted.
Kathleen, you're muted.
There we go. Okay. Thank you, Emily. That was wonderful. We appreciate all your work, and it's really exciting that we've gotten this far. I don't know how we're going to get far without you, though. That's the next problem. Jim, Chelsea, can you unmute Jim LaRocca as well, please? I think we tried to, no. There we go, Jim.
I'm sorry, just one question for Emily. You're working with any number of communities in this area. Where are we relative to everybody else? Or we be ahead or behind, or pretty much on the same track?
So currently, the town of Southampton and the town of East Hampton have both achieved bronze level certification, but they started the Climate Smart Communities years back. I believe Southampton started in about 2015, so they are well ahead of us. They're currently working towards their recertification because every 5 years you do have to reapply for recertification. In terms of other comparable villages, the village of Greenport is also working towards certification. We don't currently have how many points they have because that's not published until you're certified, but they're in the same stages as us. And we've been really fortunate that in the town of Southampton, Mike Lieberman has been a great resource for us in navigating the Climate Smart Communities program.
So there's a lot going on out there. which is
Yes.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Great. So why don't you and Tom get right into the LED streetlight?
So I joined the Climate Smart Committee when we first organized this, and basically to do some research into what we could do in the village to increase our points and do something basically smart that would save the village money, would reduce our carbon footprint, and over time would be better overall for the village. And so we put together a proposal to convert the streetlights, as Emily said previously, to LED lights. And we have a slide presentation to do. I believe Emily has the slides, and she'll go over it, and then we'll answer any questions that you have. What we really want to do is do a shared service agreement with the town of East Hampton, which would save a tremendous amount of money in the cost of the project. So I'll let Emily share her screen and go through the slides.
Absolutely. So looking at an LED streetlight conversion project, I spoke with Kristen Doulos in the town of Southampton, as they recently, in the past few years, underwent an LED conversion project. And they went through the New York Power Authority through the New York State Smart Street Lighting Program. And so this program is designed to assist municipalities in New York State in converting to LED streetlights. So it's a very simple program for municipalities to participate in that NYPA serves as the single point of contact for engineering, labor, purchasing the bulbs. So it makes it very easy for municipalities to undergo an LED streetlight conversion project. And looking at really the scope of what Sag Harbor's project is currently we have 329 streetlights. 296 of those are the Cobra heads, which we see lining our streets. They kind of have that serpent-like look. And then 33 of them are decorative, which we see on Main Street. And so NYPA has provided us with 2 different LED streetlight proposals. And the proposals are for LED bulbs with a color temperature of 3000 Kelvin, but it's very feasible to undergo the project at 2700 Kelvin. I just want to put that out there that it is for 3000, but we can go with 2700 if the village chooses. And it's just minimal financial differences in it. So the main reason of why we should consider LED is that our streetlights account for 25% of our total electricity usage. So that's over $20,000 annually just in electricity costs. That doesn't include the delivery fees, which is over 200,000 kilowatt hours. And the electricity associated with the streetlights accounts for about 10% of our total greenhouse gas emissions. So it is a significant source of that. But by converting to LED, the village has the opportunity to reduce streetlight electricity consumption by 40%, which ultimately equates to about a 10% reduction in overall electricity use. And we would see about $8,800 in electricity savings annually, as well as $6,500 in maintenance savings annually. And those maintenance savings come from the fact that every 3 to 5 years, the incandescent bulbs that we have to be replaced, whereas LEDs last a lot longer. So ultimately, an LED conversion project allows the village the opportunity to reduce their emissions by about 64 metric tons of carbon dioxide, which is about a 6% overall reduction. So some of the benefits of the LED streetlights are not only electricity and greenhouse gas reduction, but also LEDs will provide a uniform, cohesive lighting throughout the village. Right now, we do have a couple different bulbs being used. So you may see like patchy streetlight in certain areas, but by converting all the bulbs at the same time, we would allow for uniform streetlights. Another thing to note is that all the LEDs that are included in this project proposal are dark sky compliant and are very directional. So we're not going to see a lot of light scattering, and they do abide by all dark sky code, as well as LED bulbs last for over 100,000 hours, which equates to about 22 years if the streetlights were to be on 12 hours a day. So these bulbs last significantly longer than the incandescent bulbs that we currently have. So here's a comparison between our current streetlights, which are incandescents, and then LEDs. So we see that for currently our streetlights use over 200,000 kilowatt hours, but LEDs would reduce that to about 178,000 kilowatt hours. Our emissions are currently 148 metric tons of carbon dioxide from streetlights, but that could be reduced down to 126. And then our cost of electricity would also be reduced by that 8,800 that I spoke of before. So ultimately, LEDs would allow us a reduction by 40% across the board, whether it's electricity, emissions, as well as cost savings as well. So as Tom mentioned, we are hoping to be able to enter into a shared service agreement with the town of East Hampton. So I was speaking with our contact at NYPA, Jeff Lano, and he informed me that the town of East Hampton is currently also looking at the possibility of an LED streetlight conversion for their municipality. And since the Village of Sag Harbor's project is relatively small, we're only looking at about 300 streetlights. So it is a small scale project. We're not getting the best price per bulb since it's so small, but we have the opportunity to enter into a shared service agreement with the town of East Hampton if both municipalities are on board. And what that would do is it would significantly reduce the project cost for the village. And that's because we would have some shared labor and engineering costs, but ultimately we would be seeing a reduced price per bulb since we would be purchasing our bulbs alongside the village as a part of a larger project. So we're seeing significant reductions there. And so in a shared service agreement, there would be separate contracts for both municipalities. We would have separate financing and we would also be paying separately, but we would be able to see some of those savings through bulb prices and shared labor and engineering costs. And another benefit of a shared service agreement is that both municipalities would be eligible for a one-time New York State shared service grant. And this grant is designed for municipalities that enter into projects that reduce the spending of taxpayer dollars. So since an LED project would reduce our electricity costs, we would be able to receive a little bit of grant money for that. And so that grant amount is about 90% of 1 year's worth of electricity savings. So for us, it would be about $8,000. For the town of East Hampton, their project would be much bigger, so they would likely get a larger grant, but that's just another bonus of entering into a shared service agreement. So we were provided with a project proposal that is a solo project. So if the village wanted to proceed alone without the town of East Hampton, as well as a proposal that shows the cost for a shared service agreement. So as you can see on here, there are significant differences in the cost. So for the solo project, for an LED conversion for the entire village, it would cost a little more than $234,000. But in a shared service agreement, that cost goes down to $160,000. Both the annual energy savings as well as maintenance savings are the same, whether we go solo or in a shared service agreement. The way that NYPA laid out the project proposal is they provided the opportunity for a 4% interest financing plan through NYPA. And based on that, for the solo project, it would take 24 years to pay off. And like I said, the bulbs last for about 22 years. So we would likely want to explore other financing options just to get that interest rate a little lower so that it matches the lifespan of the bulbs. But the way this project is laid out is that all of the monthly payments to pay for the project would come from the electricity and maintenance savings, meaning that there's no upfront costs for the village. And all of the savings would just go towards paying for the project in the solo project. Whereas in the shared service agreement, because the total cost is much less, it would only take us 14 years to pay off at 4% interest. We can always negotiate that lower to make the payback period even less. And once again, all of those payments are going to come from the savings. But since it's only taking 14 years to pay it off, for those remaining 8 years, the village would see over $15,000 in annual savings, which for those 8 years would accumulate to over $123,000 in savings. So not only does this project allow us to significantly reduce our greenhouse gas emissions, but we also have the opportunity to save money as well. It is a ways out just because we would need to pay back for the entire project, but there is this opportunity looking towards the future. So that's all I have, but I'm sure that Tom and I would be happy to answer any questions. And if we don't have the answers for you, we can always get back to you as well.
Can I ask, and maybe this is a dumb question, but I feel like it happens in my house. If we buy all of these bulbs and we do it all the same time, are they all going to blow at the same time? Is the village going to be dark one night?
Yes, at the same instant.
I mean, it's sort of funny, but I'm not 100% kidding. We will find ourselves 22 years from now suddenly having to replace bulbs all over town very quickly.
That is correct. Since they all have, the same lifespan, it's likely that within the same period of time they will need to be replaced. It's unlikely that it'll all happen on one day, but yes, we would be looking at a complete conversion now, and then 22 years down the line, we would have to do another complete replacement.
All right, I'm putting that on you, Emily, to remind whoever's in charge 21 years from now to start thinking about it. Trustee Corish.
First of all, I'd like to say thank you to both you and Trustee Gardella. This is an amazing project. It really is. And I think the level of detail you've gone into to explain the savings and all of the infrastructure changes is remarkable. I think it's wonderful. I have two questions. One is, how long does an incandescent bulb last? We just said that these will last 22 years. How often are we changing bulbs at the moment?
Every 3 to 5 years for the incandescents.
And my second question is this just a bulb change, or is there sort of an equipment change as well? Is this a whole new head up there? And have those costs been considered in your presentation?
So all of those costs have been considered in the project proposals from NYPA. However, it's likely that for the majority of our fixtures, it's just a simple bulb swap. There may be a few fixtures that do need to be completely replaced so that we can fit them with LEDs, but that's included in the project proposal.
That's great. Listen, thanks again. I think this is, Tom, thank you so much. And Emily, it's great.
Yeah, it's great.
I think it's, it goes to the whole climate smart, literally, which is that we're cutting the greenhouse gases. We're saving money over the long term. We're investing in savings is what we're doing, just as you did at the firehouse with the solar panels. This is just a no-brainer to me. I mean, it's where, we're saving money and we're saving and helping the climate. So we're accomplishing both.
And have you taken into consideration the savings that would be realized because we don't have to change bulbs so often? I mean, that's a pretty demanding, you got to get up there with a ladder at every light pole or whatever and change the bulb.
So those savings are incorporated into this annual maintenance savings amount.
Okay.
That takes into account the labor associated with it, the new bulbs, all of that. So that's kind of split. Even though we're replacing every 3 to 5 years, those costs are split onto like an annual amount, just so we can look at them.
Okay. Thank you.
There's still, East Hampton is still in discussions about doing it. I'm pretty sure they're going to do it. And I asked to be updated, and kept in the loop as far as the trustees go and where they're at, as far as the project goes, so we can, get that agreement in place as soon as they're ready to go. If I have the support of the trustees, I don't see why we couldn't at that time move forward with this.
Yeah, I see no reason why not.
Yep. I think
It does look like we have another question. May I unmute them?
Yeah. Someone. Yeah, if you're in charge.
Hello, this is Lily Fell. I want to echo the statements of Trustee Corish. It's such a great thing that you guys are working on, and it's a thrill to listen to this. I'm curious, are you leaning in the direction of either the 2700 or the 3000 Kelvin bulb? Which one are you leaning towards?
Yeah, if I could answer that question. I think that because we passed the law, limiting it to 2,700, the savings, I mean, we're going to lose a little bit in savings and a little bit in, controlling the greenhouse gases. But I think the overall effect, the fact that it's, you know, we passed that law for 2,700. I don't think we should go outside, or the village should do something that we're asking the residents to, you know, go outside of that. We should stay, you know, conform to the law that we passed. So I believe we're gonna go in the direction of the 2,700.
That's great. Thank you very much. Thanks for your super work.
You're welcome.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you all. Yeah, Emily, fabulous. Tom, thank you for your, shepherding this through, and we will, as soon as we know what East Hampton's doing, get on to the next step with it. The next that is not on the agenda, but I do want to touch on briefly, is the idea of solar panels in our village. This is something that our zoning board has asked us to look at, our ARB has asked us to look at, and we haven't solved yet. We did have about 2 years ago, a house in the historic district, but it was not a historic house, put on these Tesla solar panels. Those panels are not unattractive. They did cause some glare issues for some of their neighbors, but they were a good solution, our ARB felt, for a way to get solar into our village and try it. Since then, Tesla has changed their shingles, and unfortunately they have changed it to something that is no longer attractive and really no longer as good of a solution for our village. So we don't want to give up on solar panels. We do want to try to get to a place where it can work, but I also don't think we want big solar panels that are coming off our roofs, especially in the historic district. So what I would say is, for those of you out there who really want to support solar and want to get there, help us do the research, help get involved with the environmental group, and let's just keep working and keep coming up with ideas on solar. We are not anti-solar in the village, but we are anti-big panels on top of a roof that would make a problem. So keep looking, keep telling us different ideas, and we will keep looking at different ways to do it, both inside the historic district and outside. Moving on, we have the overview of the Gobler report on the water quality in Sag Harbor, and Mary Ann Eddy is going to take us through that briefly. And I don't know who's in charge anymore to unmute her.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yep.
Is my screen showing up?
Your face is showing up.
No, I don't want that.
Do you have a screen sharing option?
I do. Let's see. It's not going to come up with the right picture, but we can fix that shortly there. Let's see. Hang on. Share screen. There it goes. Share.
No. Okay.
Okay, and play from the start. All right. So thank you, Mayor. Thank you, trustees. Thank you for giving me a few minutes to talk about where we are with the water quality monitoring that we've been doing now for 3 years in Sag Harbor. Some of you know, many of you may not know that are on this call, that this has been done by Dr. Christopher Gobler's lab. He is a professor at the School of Marine and Atmospheric Sciences. He's also the director of the Center for Clean Water Technology. And trustees, I just want to thank you again. I mean, yes, you give us support, you give us moral support, but importantly, you also give us financial support. And over the 3 years that we've been engaged in this project, you've contributed about 20% of the cost. And I also want to thank all the people, the governmental entities, the individuals, the agencies, organizations, et cetera, who have contributed the other 80%. It's not a negligible amount of money that has been coming in bits and pieces, and I appreciate it. So let's see. So the 2020 water, oops, let me get rid of these guys, my pictures, okay. The 2020 water quality conclusions are consistent with those in 2018 and 2019. All these reports concluded that generally the water quality conditions are good. But, and it's a rather big but, there are some dissolved oxygen measurements that have been falling below the New York DEC standard. And you go, well, why should I care about that? And the best way for me to explain that, or to think about it myself, is that as human beings, we are out walking around and we keep ourselves alive because we are able to access oxygen in the atmosphere. And the fish, the finfish, the shellfish, they only get oxygen to maintain their biomass through dissolved oxygen. So the oxygen is actually in the water, and then through their gills, they're able to access that oxygen. So when the amount of dissolved oxygen in the water decreases to a certain level, it's very stressful to marine life. And I think it's stressful to the point of death in some cases. And I think all of us remember when there was the big fish die-off, there was a turtle die-off. I think that the people that are really studying why our bay scallops are on the decline, they also point to low dissolved oxygen as one of the stressors that have contributed to that sad situation. So something that we really need to keep an eye on. And another thing that showed up is that some measurements of algae were exceeding federal guidelines put forth by NOAA and the EPA. The latter condition was associated with a dense rust tide that occurred here in Sag Harbor during July and August. And you're all probably thinking like, well, I didn't notice a rust tide. If you look at the water, you don't see the rust tide if you have your hands in the bay or the coves. But if you were flying an airplane over it, you would be able to see the plumes streaking along our waterway. Now, the good news is that rust tide is not harmful to human beings, but again, it's the finfish, it's the shellfish that suffer. And rust tide, it's called Cochlodinium, and it's an algae that produces a certain toxin that's a bit like hydrogen peroxide, and it attacks the gills of finfish and shellfish. So that can, of course, have a very deleterious effect on the population in our waters. Overall, the report reaffirmed the need to reduce our watershed nitrogen in order to improve the water quality here. Okay. So that's one side of the report in the study that's been taking place for many years here now, not many years, 3 years. But on the other side is the bacteria, and a lot of people are concerned about pathogens in the water. So the bacteriological measurements affirmed prior observations, plus it offered some new findings. It had identified the Haven Sump and Little Northwest Creek as strong sources of potentially pathogenic bacteria and a challenge to surface waters. Fecal bacterial levels were more than an order of magnitude above state standards. Microbial source tracking indicated these bacteria were largely derived from dogs and small mammals. That's a combination category. Now, microbial source tracking is a scientific technique where you can take bacteria and you can analyze their DNA and you can find out whether or not they're birds, they're deer, they're humans, or they fall into this all other category of dogs and small mammals. While the Haven Sump did not impair water quality 500 feet out from the shore, we had a buoy out there and we were taking samples from that as well as at the sump itself. It's likely contaminating Haven's beach at water's edge. And I think that that's something that we would all be concerned about. You know, you think about the little kids that are out there with their little trucks and their pails and their shovels, or you think about people that are more timid swimmers, they're hanging out at water's edge. And that might be exactly where this contamination is spreading from the outfall of the ditch there, the sump. Likewise, elevated Enterococcus levels outside of Little Northwest Creek suggested that the drainage there could be a recreational hazard. So continuing with this, analyses of elevated levels of fecal bacteria inside the breakwater. What we were just discussing is everything outside the breakwater, but now moving inside the breakwater indicated that the bacteria there were derived from a combination of sources, including both that combo category, dog and small mammals, probably brought into the water through storm water road runoff. And then there was also human fecal bacteria that probably came from boats. On a good note is that the effluent from the sewage treatment plant contained high levels of human-derived bacterial DNA. But the companion piece to that is that an indicator organism was very low. So it means that as the effluent passes through the sewage treatment plant, after it goes through the UV light, all there is cell debris. And that cell debris is able to be identified as being human, but it's also indicating that from this sampling here, this study, that there were no viable bacteria leaving the sewage treatment plant. And then lastly, from aerial photos, it appears that there was blue-green algae in the sump. And that's this aerial photo. And you can see, I don't know if you see my cursor or not, but there's a bright stripe down the middle of the sump. We weren't testing for blue-green algae last year, but there were other places in East Hampton where the lab was testing. They found very alarming high levels of blue-green algae in Wainscott Pond. Of course, there's been blue-green algae in Southampton and Lake Agawam for a few years now. And there's also reports of blue-green algae out in Montauk. So blue-green algae, if you may remember, in 2012, there was a dog that died on Georgia Pond. He was paddling around, this, that, and the other, and he licked his paws, cleaning himself up, and he died. And there have been other instances of pet deaths, not here locally, East Hampton, Southampton, but certainly on Long Island, certainly nationwide. I don't believe there's been any deaths of human beings, but there is recorded instances of real sickness. And interestingly, I just heard this, and any of you might have as well from Dr. Gobler's report, they tracked the death of bald eagles in the Midwest back down through the food chain, and it came down to exposure to blue-green algae. So this is definitely not good stuff, and I think we want to really keep our eye on it and be knowledgeable about where it is so that we can keep our residents away from it. So recommendations going forward, we need to further our efforts to reduce nitrogen loads in the surface water. Great effort being made to extend the sewer lines. That's going to help. It's not going to do the whole job. We need to upgrade on-site septic systems to low nitrogen systems. And I'm wondering, yes, I know that there's East Hampton and Southampton rebates, there's the county rebate, there's some contribution from the state, but I'm wondering what the village might be able to do. Either if it's an honor roll, whether or not they get free parking on the wharf, whether or not they get a bumper sticker, I don't know, but I'm wondering whether or not we want to give recognition to people who are voluntarily including or upgrading to IA systems. And I think you'll hear me say this many times, but we need to examine our storm water management practices, and that includes snow removal. Again, here further, another point is we need to further assess the Haven sump as a strong source of fecal bacterial contamination. So we just, I mentioned before that the water's 500 feet offshore are okay, not a problem, but that right there at the outflow, it may contaminate the neighboring beach areas. And I think what we need to do in the sampling that's coming up now is we need to go to that water's edge and sample like 10 feet on each side of that outfall, 20 feet, 30 feet, see what kind of results we're getting, whether or not that contamination is spreading to water's edge where we have residents and visitors swimming. I think we need to think really creatively, further pinpoint the source and the spread of the contamination. So I think that up until now, we've only been sampling as the water comes out of the sump, it goes through the vault, through the sponges, that's where we've been sampling. What I would like to do this coming year is also, oh, I didn't know I had control, admitting somebody, no. I'm sorry. is I would like to be able to sample directly from those drain pipes that come off of Bay Street before that water ever touches the ditch or the sump, to gather some water and find out what's coming off of Bay Street. And I think it would be helpful then, as we are also checking for blue-green algae, to test a few sites as it goes down the sump towards the water, as well as continuing to evaluate the water that's coming out of the vault that's just come through the sponges. I think we need to get creative in terms of how we might be able to mitigate the outflow of this sump. Can it be redesigned to absorb more water while it's transiting down towards the water? And I think, again, we need to examine our stormwater management practices, including snow removal. Then independently, we need to specifically look for blue-green algae in the Havens Beach sump. And I think we need to include Otter Pond in that. If they have blue-green algae in Wainscott Pond, Georgica Pond, Lake Agawam, I would think that Otter Pond could be as likely a location as any of those. And then the last thing is that we need to continue to apply for grants, because it's really my vision that we need a Havens Beach watershed master plan that covers the whole area, not bits and pieces, individual projects, but incorporating those projects that we've already done, that we have funding for, that we've already designed, but to look at the whole spread of the area from Little Northwest Creek to Cor Maria on the west, all the way south to Route 114. And that would include updating the mapping of the stormwater outflows. So that's all I have. If there's any questions, I'd be glad to try to answer them.
I have one question. When you talk about dog poop being a major concern, is that necessarily from the dog park there, or is that running from the whole watershed that comes into that drain?
Well, that's exactly why I want to do this, a pinpoint source and spread of contamination. So if you look at the ditch on the very southern edge of it, you can see the pipes that are coming in from Bay Street, right? This is like, it's like storm drains, right? I would like to be able to grab samples there before it gets into the Havens Beach area at all.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right. So let's grab that. Let's compare that. Let's see what happens as we move further down the sump. Have like a couple or three. They could be moving over the course of the sampling period. But let's make sure that we're really sampling what's actually coming out of the storm drain before it gets into the sump. Because I walk my dog down there. I walk down from Hampton Street all the time, and I see dog poop all the way down, much more so than I do in the dog park. So I don't know what that's about, but certainly there's probably some, fecal contamination in the water that's heading towards the sump before it ever gets there.
Marianne, if I may, first of all, I'd like to say, I'm not sure if I've ever been able to say this before, but I agree with absolutely everything you said. I think that just a really great presentation. You touched on all the points. I agree that Havens Beach needs a complete holistic look at and we need to look at old plans that were there going all the way back to the 90s when there was talk of bringing in some more wetlands, connecting more people to the sewage treatment plant. What we didn't mention is what an amazing job the plant does at reducing nitrogen, and then to look at community IA systems. I think our solution is going to be a little bit of everything, where everything is important, and we're going to have to look at different parts of the village and design solutions. And as I say, everything is important. We need to encourage everybody who can put in an IA system to do so. And this is sort of a legacy issue with Sag Harbor, and it's not going to be solved overnight, but we just need to be constantly making forward motion in the right direction, so that when the day comes when we have to hand it off to another group of people, that there is a plan in place and there's a roadmap.
Right. And I totally agree with that. And in one of the reports that I saw from Chris Gobler is he shared his information from sampling he did here in Sag Harbor in 2008. And it was incredibly crummy then, and it's incredibly crummy now. And if whoever, if people had engaged with this problem maybe in 2008, which is what, how long ago is that? 13 years ago?
Yep.
We wouldn't be looking at the same messy situation we have now.
No,
Maybe-
but we're engaging now so that in 13
Right.
years, and 13 years is not what it used to be, we'll be in a much better situation. And I'd also like to salute you for the tenacity in getting this program going. I watched you as you tried to raise funds for this in the early years, as in 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and tried to sort of wrangle the money to get this done wasn't easy. I hope that it's now proving to be a successful project, that funding in the future will be easier to come by, because we can't stop this now. We have to keep going. And we have to develop more testing areas, testing sites, and we have to develop greater detail in our testing, just like you described, testing the outflow pipes before it hits the water, before it hits the harbor, so
Right.
that we can really build up a picture of activities on land that are affecting the water quality. And then we're in a position to create mitigating opportunities.
So talking about fundraising, I'm of course very grateful for what the village is chipping in, and the Sag Harbor Partnership has consistently been a great contributor. And then, you know, I'm going to be going around with my begging bowl and trying to get this funded. We have a proposal from Chris Gobler, and it incorporates all the points that I talked about, because he and I had talked about where we thought we needed to go. One of the things that really concerns me is that we have been led to believe that East Hampton CPF would consider funding this master plan. And I just heard from John Parker today that it's not happening. And that's $52,000. So now it's like, where do we find $52,000? Because we just need a master plan. And
I think we can go back and ask again. Maybe we have to reorganize our presentation and
I don't know if it was the presentation. I had heard that they would consider a study, even though normally the common wisdom is that they do not fund studies, they fund projects. But we heard, I heard through what I thought were reliable sources from Kim Shaw that they would consider this, and we ponied up $2,700 to put together a really great presentation. Or grant application, but we can take that grant application. I just heard today on a call, a countywide call from Frank Costelli, that they're doing the 1/4% sales tax grant again. Now that's a 50% match, but maybe we can find the 50% somewhere else.
maybe you and I can talk offline
Yes,
and
I
see
think
what we
that
can
would be
develop.
good, please.
Okay.
Tom Gardella, did you have something you want to say?
No, I just wanted to thank Mary Ann for all her efforts, and you know, I think we got to really do a concerted effort here to cut the nitrates down that are going into the bay. I mean, finding out where the source is, that's a big one. But I mean, the sewer system and all the work that Aiden is doing on it should be applauded for that. And I've helped and made some suggestions on that committee, and I think we just got to stay on it. Just stick with it.
Yep.
And thank you. Thank you again, Mary Ann.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's interesting that the DEC or the health department has only relatively recently recognized nitrogen as a problem. Hasn't it only been a few years that they've started to be concerned about it?
Well,
Department?
they funded a huge watershed study. That's it's not as detailed as we would really like for Havens Beach, but they did all of Suffolk County. And they definitely realized nitrogen is a problem. And I think it was a lot the result of that study. But interesting now, it's nitrogen is becoming talked about as a health problem.
Right.
You know, right now it's people go, oh, okay, so we have some algae in the bay, who cares? But, you know, when nitrogen starts to become more than, I think it's 4 milligrams per something or another, that in fact it can become a health risk.
Yeah.
So that's going to change a lot of minds, and it's like, let's get out there in front of that.
And it's enormously expensive to remove from drinking water.
Oh, never even thought about it.
When it reaches a certain level.
Yeah.
We have a lot of people who want to ask questions or speak. We've also gotten a great number of letters about dogs on the beach that are both part of this conversation as well as the Parks Law conversation that will happen in 2 weeks. But I do want to ask people to keep their comments relatively brief. We have a long agenda still to go. So Bruce Fletcher, if you want to start, I believe you can unmute yourself. If you can't, let us know somehow.
I was able to unmute myself. If everybody watches me, I can't do the video. I'm gonna make this quick. First of all, I think everybody has to worry about the ROI, return on investment, and which is Mary Ann's working on to direct it. You know, you want to spend money where you get the best return. Second thing, I just want to say Mary Ann's work is just great, period. And I do want to make some comments on hurrying this up. I'm certainly not an expert on pollution by any stretch of the imagination, but I do understand the scientific method where a problem is identified, relevant data is gathered, a hypothesis is formulated from this data, and the hypothesis empirically tested. I bring this up because it appears that many people, including waterfront owners, advocate eliminating dogs to significantly decrease the pollution, which, by the way, is a hypothesis, a guess. And no empirical data at this moment supports the truth of this hypothesis. In fact, Dr. Goldberg actually disagrees explicitly with this hypothesis. In fact, Dr. Goldberg actually disagrees, during the meeting with the board work session, March 18th, starting at 1 hour, 10 minutes, 30 seconds on the video. Mr. Agosi asked about the deer population contributing to Havens Beach pollution and fencing. Dr. Goldberg is very clear that the pollution from deer, remembering the sampling includes all small mammals, is a very small percentage of the pollution. Dr. Goldberg continued with his assessment, stating that the vast majority of pollution that is in the sump actually is from runoff entering the sump at the street, which Mary Ann, you talked about testing. Though Dr. Goldberg does not state it explicitly, I assume this runoff would include small mammals, fecal bacteria. I don't speak fast well. Dr. Goldberg also states that the answer to the pollution, this is Dr. Goldberg, is actually what was there before and removed, vegetation and wetlands.
Right.
That is when he spoke to you. Furthermore, at 1 hour and 15 seconds, the question came up concerning the effectiveness of the biofilter spongers. And Dr. Goldberg was clearly less than enthusiastic that using these devices is effective in eliminating the pollution issues at Havens Beach. The answer, according to Dr. Goldberg, to solve Havens Beach pollution issues, wetlands, and barring by law, dogs or fencing other small mammals such as deer would not contribute much to solving the pollution issue at Havens Beach. Which brings me to the dredging of Little Northwest Creek, if I can go on. We had only 2 significant wetland swamps on Sag Harbor Bay, and according to the new Wetlands Act, these are obviously important areas. We eliminated Havens Beach Swamp years ago. We now have major pollution issues at this beach. Dr. Goldberg has stated we need wetlands to solve this issue, which we removed. Are we going to mess with the last wetlands area of Little Northwest Creek with no proof of the hypothesis that moving and widening the exit channel would help with the pollution issue? Even Dr. Goldberg, starting at 1 hour, 19 minutes and 30 seconds on the video, wouldn't answer at the work session the question concerning the validity of this hypothesis without further study and data. Don't we learn from our mistakes? It is our last great wetlands on the South Sag Harbor Bay, and we should be extremely careful not to get into a situation that exists at Havens Beach. Depending on how far back the channel will be dug could mean that thousands and thousands of bank mussels will be destroyed, along with thousands and thousands of piss clams. These are cleansing and filtering critters for sure. Who knows else what will be affected? No one does. No empirical data to prove the hypothesis that I know of. I suggest before doing anything, we search our wetlands across the country for examples of municipalities that have basically the same issues we are facing with Little Northwest Creek, that performed this widening of the exit channel to eliminate the pollution and documented extensively the results. If you don't find any, that should tell you something. If you find these reports and it work, I suggest you perform this modification to Little Northwest Creek, is to create a large natural berm on the west side of the proposed new channel location, only go back from the shoreline to the nearest channel of wetlands waters, then backhoe a narrow channel just to the east of this berm and let nature take its course. It will wash out a deeper channel in no time. That's what water does. I guess what I'm saying here is, where is the empirical data, and somebody can correct me, proving the hypothesis that moving and widening the exit channel a little northwest harbor to increase the flow of water into and out of the swamp will decrease the pollution. Yes, it will help restore the beaches in front of the communities along the shoreline, which I have no problem with at all. But decrease pollution? It is anybody's hypothesis, AKA guess if this is true. As I've said before, as far as I know, no empirical data to verify the hypothesis, and without data, by dredging, we may be making matters worse and not better. Let's not make that mistake again. My hypothesis is opening the channel more would flush more pollutants quicker with more water volume before the swamp had a chance to filter the polluted swamp waters, therefore don't bring more pollutants into the bay, leading to a swamp with less polluted waters, but more pollutants entering our bay. Nowhere does this decrease the amount of pollutants, but puts more pressure on the bay to decrease the pollutants, which is not very good at, and not utilizing what the swamp does best, which is to filter pollutants.
Okay,
Now,
thank you, Bruce. Oh,
can I just finish this one thing? It's about the dogs.
please.
I know others, and thank you. I know others believe that no dogs should be allowed on the beaches from Havens Beach to Little Northwest Creek, including below the shoreline. Sag Harbor has no jurisdiction below the shoreline except for navigational purposes granted by New York State. As far as private beaches go, those are private beaches. And if an owner of that private beach wants to register a trespassing complaint against anyone walking on the beach or walking on the beach with their dog, should register a trespassing plea against that person. I am sure that word will spread around quickly that dogs are not wanted on private beaches.
Okay.
Personally, if I want to go down to my private beach and play fetch with my dog on my private beach, I'm going to. It is my right as the owner.
Thank you, Bruce.
You're welcome.
John Parker, again,
Thanks for your patience,
thank you.
everybody, really.
Thank you. John Parker. Can you unmute yourself?
No, it's saying the host,
Good.
the
You're done.
host isn't allowing it.
You're live.
Oh, am I now? Okay. It's still not allowing the video, but I guess you don't need to really see me. I just want to thank Mary Ann for her presentation. I wanted to clarify one point though, because I think that the test results that she related portrayed an overly negative point of view. I'm going to start my video. It's saying you're asking me to start the video here, so it was better without it. But anyway, there are numerous agencies that are doing water testing, including at Havens Beach. The county tests, the Surfrider Foundation tests, the DEC tests. And I have DEC tests that go back, I think it's at least 10 years. A lot of those tests are very good. A lot of those tests show very low levels of bacteria. What we really have is a situation where it appears to be stormwater derived, so that when we don't have rain, and most of the summer we're not having a lot of rain unless it's a storm, there is very low levels of bacteria coming out of the ditch. But then you have a storm and basically it flushes out. The design is for there to be an overflow, which overflows the sponges so that the water coming out in a storm is not filtered at all. So I say this so people won't worry on the average day to go swimming at Havens Beach because of the bacteria, because basically there's no bacteria coming out of it. It's a situation where when you have storm water, you'll have that issue, and you have that issue on other areas that drain from the road. Havens Beach drains principally from Hempstead Street, but there are other streets that drain. There's a drain from Azure Rest at the end of Terry Drive, which we're working on. But it's really stormwater derived, and you can see it by looking at these other test results. I'd add here too that I was down at Havens Beach with the mayor about a week ago, and her being very sharp-eyed noticed that there was an animal swimming in the ditch, which is either a muskrat or an otter. went back and looked at it a couple of times. It appears to be an otter, and I'm trying to get a photo of it, but that's a small animal, which would obviously be leaving fecal bacteria in the in the ditch. The other thing that I would mention.
We have a number of other people waiting to speak, so you can wrap up.
I just wanted to add to two things in terms of Little Northwest Creek. One, the problem seems to be curing itself in terms of the outflow has retreated to the east 600 or 700 feet from where it was last summer or the summer before, and that raises the question of to what extent the dredging will be necessary. And I think we ought to raise that issue as to whether we should hold off and see what happens. The other is that the East Hampton CPF Water Quality Committee did recommend a project to reduce stormwater runoff from the roads in Nineveh Beach into the creek, because we have the same problem there where anything on the roads runs off into the creek during a storm.
Okay, thank you, John. Lisa? Lisa Denham.
Thank you,
Hi.
Mary Mulcahy. Appreciate your efforts along with Marianne Eady and the village in arranging the annual water quality reports, and appreciate the transparency. The report by Marianne Eady was excellent. As you know, we have submitted on behalf of Sag Harbor Hills Improvement Association our position respecting the findings in Dr. Gobler's report. It is clear that he has stated that dogs and small mammals are the primary source of the fecal bacteria contamination at the Havens Beach sump, as well as Little Northwest Creek, as well as the Little Northwest Creek outlet, which is at our beaches, from ranging from 51% to 86%. And dogs and other domesticated animals are within the control of the village, respecting their permission at Havens Beach or in the Bay waters for its management. And so we are urging the village between May 15th and September 15th to prohibit dogs and other domesticated animals, and see when testing is done this fall whether that results in improvement and less contamination. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Shannon Richards.
Unmuted. All right. My phone's unmuted. My apologies.
Nope,
I don't have video.
You're good.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, if anybody knows me, they know how much I was happy when Mr. Fletcher established what brief was, because a Richards could easily consume that time, but I will attempt to do better. I'd like to echo what Lisa said, but I would like to take a different tact. I thank the mayor for her comments earlier on looking back at the report that was submitted back in 2008, and the fact that now in 2021, she's absolutely right. And the numbers bear out that we've seen no appreciable improvement. In fact, we've seen very similar numbers of high concentrations. I can read a bar graph. I trust all the trustees and the mayor can as well. 80% is 80%. And that's a significant level of contamination, particularly at Havens Beach. I will respect the mayor's request to not tie this into discussion with regards to the law proposal for Code 186. I will simply say that this is a conversation that involves a series of dominoes, and those dominoes are related. And I trust the mayor and the trustees to see the relationship of those things and to choose to be bold at some point to act. In 2008, I can't speak to why we didn't act. I say we, and that's an extension. I'm being generous with my own involvement because I wasn't on the call in 2008. Maybe I should have been. I'm on the call today. I'm simply asking for the trustees and the mayor to go back and read the reports, to read the hard numbers. I think that some of Dr. Goldberg's findings in some letters is being misrepresented, particularly on page 14 that was referenced in the letter I saw that questioned whether or not he was attributing those findings to specifically dog fecal contamination at Havens Beach. He was quite clear in the paragraph above that the assays that he was using for testing were 100% accurate in that indicator. And while they do share some indications with small mammal indications, because we're all kind of 1 in a million species, his data was very confident that dogs may be a contributing factor. Mr. Fletcher keeps saying that there should be empirical data. I don't need to stand under an anvil to have it fall and hit on my head to consider that I may not want to stand under the anvil. I think that it's fair to say that we have an opportunity. We have a means of being able to address a number of concerns and take an action. Some might say bold, some might say sensible, and explore whether or not we see benefit from it. But clearly, Havens Beach and the quality of our water affects all village residents, not just those who have the privilege and the blessing of living along the bay. I had nothing to do with that. That was my great-grandmother's work generations ago. I'm fortunate I still get to enjoy it. The members who live in the village who get to enjoy it year-round, that's also a blessing. And I think it's worth this body taking an action that protects what's been defined as our most beautiful asset of being our public beach and our waterways. And I appreciate your consideration and acting boldly in that regard. Thank you, folks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Earl Taylor. Hello, Earl. There you are.
Hi, everyone. And I will be very brief, and I'll try not to repeat anything that others have said. First, regarding the dogs on the beach, I do have to I kind of try to emphasize that, you know, this is an issue that we can control. And, you know, we know there are a lot of sources of contamination and pollution on the beach. So, you know, when we are actually considering loosening the regulations to allow more access to dogs on the beach, in light of the report that we got from Dr. Gobler, I don't see how that makes much sense. So in my view, at a minimum, Sag Harbor should maintain the current restrictions which prohibit dogs on the beaches from Memorial Day to Labor Day, full stop. Or I would be in favor of even in strengthening them. I do want to make one brief comment, and I don't think that really was a subject of today's meeting, but you know, to say a little bit about the comments on the dredging issue that is planned to take place at Little Northwest Creek. I really do take issue with the suggestion that this was done without consideration, without intensive study and years of analysis of its impact. You know, a very detailed study was presented to the DEC, and it was approved based on a scientific evaluation and belief that it would improve the water quality to our beaches. I live on this beach. My family, my kids play in this water. We are not interested in doing anything haphazardly or in any fashion that would impair our water quality. We just saw a report from Dr. Gobler that indicated that the waters in my beach in front of Nineveh, Sag Harbor Hills, and Azaresh are the worst in our community. So, you know, it is critical. It's an emergency for us here that we do everything to address that issue. And that's not next week, that's not next year, that's immediately. And anything that we can do immediately should be done. So if that's dogs on the beach, if that's dredging, it should be done. It should be done right away, and we should assess whether it helps. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Errol. Mr. Fletcher and Mr. Parker, I think we've heard a lot. I would like to suggest that maybe we do have a meeting with Mr. Fletcher, Mr. Parker, Errol, you and the Little Northwest Creek folks, and maybe we can have a meeting with all of us so that we can share some of the data that you're talking about that we've gone over with Mr. Fletcher.
Mayor, before we move on, I'd just like to say one more thing. We've talked about all of these different issues and all of these sources of pollution. One thing that Dr. Gobler did mention, and we haven't discussed at all, is the outflow from boats and boats in the harbor. And I would hope that this year we would have a stepped up enforcement and inspection regime. I'm not sure if Bob Borey is on the call, but he has said that they have a new plan, and I'm looking forward to hearing it. But it's an important part of the puzzle. As we say, everything is important in this battle.
Yes, I think maybe we could ask Bob to join the board meeting next 2 weeks from now.
Yeah, I think that would be great.
So we've gotten, the Board of Trustees and myself have gotten a large number of notes about the dog park itself and the good and the bad, and should it be open, should it be closed. It is our only dog park, although it is not a quote legal dog park. It is our only place where dogs can go running. I did get an offer, or I was told of an offer of someone who would actually fence it in. And if that is the case, I would be willing to speak to that person and see if we can create, if we want to, if we can create more of a dog park in that area, in a smaller area, and keep it away from the drain, keeping the dogs away and also keeping them off the beach. So that is a conversation that can continue. We will be talking about the parks law next week. Right now, the law does have no dogs Memorial Day to Labor Day. We're getting a lot of comments back and forth on that, but please continue with comments because we will take that one for a vote next week. We also, I just do want everyone to know that we are going to wash out the sponges. Those will be washed out there. They get washed out twice a year. They will be washed out in mid-May. We're going to wait for the April rains to go away, though we have not had as many April rains as one maybe would want, but we are going to do a washing of the sponges. And then we are also going to look at potentially some of the old serpentine plans for that drain and trying to make it, and this is where much more research is needed, of if we did make it more serpentine and slow it down a little, would that indeed slow down the green algae? Because that is the biggest fear of the drain at the moment. So lots of things that are being worked on and things to come, but lots of opinions are also being shared, and we will keep moving forward. So with that, we do have a Chamber of Commerce letter of intent for Harbor Fest. Beth, do you have that to discuss, or?
I'm sorry, Mayor, I do have that.
That's all right. So I think it's.
I have that.
Okay.
I do, if you just give me one moment. Yes, the Chamber of Commerce submitted a letter that they intend to hold Harbor Fest again this year on September 11th and 12th. As with other years, they would like to submit an application for a permit to use Long Wharf for the main event, as well as Marine Park for the annual Arts and Craft Fair. They said they would like to use each location from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. and expect approximately 300 to 500 people, excuse me. So they would like to submit that application, and just wanted to give you a heads up about that.
Do we have comments from the trustees on that?
I would just offer that we have talked with them about it, that to the extent they want to extend any of the activity onto Steinbeck Park, that we should make that part of whatever authorization we do and welcome it.
I think that's a great idea because I think the more we can spread out the activities, the better it is.
Yep.
Yep. All right. So I think that sounds like that's fine for them to put in an application, and we'll take it up at a board meeting.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you all for being part of the conversation. I do hope one of these days, very soon, we can have these conversations face to face again and be able to have a little bit more nuance to them. But we will keep moving forward, and thank you. So now the first introduction is a local law amending chapter 278, the waterways law. And John Parker, if you can unmute, you're going to do a introduction of this. I believe, John, I'm not sure that do we want the maps up while you talk? Is that one of the things that?
If you have them there, that would be fine, but I don't need it.
Okay, why don't you talk, and Chelsea, if you want to unmute me, I will see if I can get the map up while John's talking.
And I'm trying to
Right,
get
now
myself
unmute me.
back on here. I think you can hear me, but can't see me. Hostess stopped my video again.
Oh, I think I'm
no.
the host now.
Now I can start my video. I don't know how much that adds to it, but anyway, this has been a long time in progress. Basically, the amendments that we're looking at now are amendments for the purpose of expanding a village jurisdiction, which has been a desire of the village for quite some time. The current effort started in 2015 when the harbor master made a request. It passed the legislature in 2016. We had an agreement with the trustees about expanding jurisdiction. This is again out into the bay beyond the 1,500 feet that the village had previously had. The expansion is out basically to the channel. The purpose was to have jurisdiction over a unregulated mooring field where there were no limitations on basically anything. Anything went in that area. We had our first public hearing before the Harbor Committee in 2016. And the current version was recommended by the Harbor Committee 2017, and we've gone back and forth on a lot of changes since then, but basically it's similar. And the current version before us is very similar to the version that we were talking about 2 years ago at the village board meetings. But I'm going to quickly outline the changes. I've already said that the main change is the jurisdiction going from 1,500 feet out to the channel, and adding a recreation area to the east off Barcelona Point. We've changed the definitions. I won't go through them all, but they're just to accommodate different languages necessary when you have more than one mooring field. There were no changes to the speed zones, basically, which is 200 feet in the cove, 500 feet offshore, 5 miles an hour. Outside the breakwater, there was no changes in the other mooring areas, no changes basically in the fairway, which is from 500 to 1,500 feet outside the breakwater, and acts as an access way, so there'll be no mooring in that area. Aircraft, there was a significant change. Previously, aircraft could apply for a permit to taxi within Sag Harbor waters, and that's been eliminated. Taxiing is now going to be allowed in the outer mooring area, again, beyond 1,500 feet, but no takeoffs or landings, and that includes helicopters in that area. So those landings will have to take place outside of the harbor management area. Seaplanes are then free to taxi into the mooring area and moor there or pick up passengers. No discharge zone. This is something that Aiden is interested in. And it's really the only change is to expand the village's pre-existing no discharge zone out into the expanded area. Now, there's also a federal no discharge zone and there's a state no discharge zone, and they overlap. So the village doesn't have any extra area that's no discharge as opposed to the state or the feds. All of the Peconic Estuary is a no discharge zone where even treated sewage from large yachts is not allowed to be discharged. And any mixture of black water and gray water is considered black water, and it's also not allowed to be discharged. For discharges, you have to go out beyond the no discharge zone, which is a line between Orient Point and Montauk Point. There's also provision that the village board will come up with rules and schedules for the enforcement of the no discharge zone. So that will be a second step. The next part is basically new rules for the outer management area, which are going to be a little different than in the breakwater. As I said, there's creation of a no mooring area, recreational area off Barcelona. The mooring area is the entire rest of that outer area. And basically it's so that there are rules so that the village knows who is out there. The rental moorings are allowed, and this is different from inside the breakwater, where various individuals or companies can, after getting a permit, put down a mooring that they will rent out. Permits for actual vessels are required for extended stays or anchoring. There are enhanced reporting requirements for commercial and foreign flag vessels. Since this was last introduced, there has been a clarification of insurance requirements, and there's insurance requirements for all moorings, anchoring permits, with a clarification that the mooring owner, when he is renting to a short-term stay vessel, will be responsible for any damage caused by that vessel, unless the vessel has provided insurance, proof of insurance and liability, environmental liability, so that the village knows who it is and that it would be covered. If we don't have that information, then the mooring owner is going to take that responsibility. The houseboat rules were clarified to an extent, and then we get to the charts. These are updates of the 2006 harbor management chart, which you see on the screen. Again, the sections inside 1,500 feet have not really changed. The fairway is in the same place. The inner harbor anchoring area is in the same location. The speed zones are in the same locations. Where in the inset, there's an inset that's not shown here, which is number 2, which shows the inner harbor. And there was an update on that using and there we have it, using a current satellite photo rather than the 2006 satellite photo, so that we could see the changes in the docks which have occurred in that time. The location of the channel was adjusted slightly because there was some question as to its location in the prior chart. It's a 100-foot wide channel, which should allow for access for all of the yachts, and it also allows sufficient room for docking off the Sag Harbor Yacht Club, et cetera. And there is, I did leave out one provision that there were some questions about. It's a new provision clarifying the village's authority to limit the number and type of vessels moored or anchored, particularly in the outer management area. There is no set number of vessels at this point or moorings that are allowed, because the numbers for the last couple of years have actually been lower than they were in 2014, 2015, 2016. But it does allow the village to set a limit if that is necessary for safety, environmental purposes, et cetera. And persons who are requesting that a limit be set, because I have heard that can go to the East Hampton trustees, who we're working in cooperation with, the Harbor Committee, or directly to the village board with a request for that to be reviewed for the need to make any limits. But as I say, there are no current limits, and there are none proposed at the moment. And that's it.
Thank you very much. Great overview of that. Are there any questions? This is, again, just to put it on the agenda for a vote in 2 weeks. So anything from the board? If not, if I could get a motion to introduce the law. Thank you, Tom. Can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you, Jim. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you again, John. That was a great overview.
Okay. Well, it was either good or bad because I didn't get any questions, so it may have confused everybody. But
Well, you know what? I apologize. I have not. Renee, do you have a question on this? Renee Simmons?
Yes, I do. I'm sorry. I know that when this was originally reviewed, John, by the way, thank you for all the work that you've done and everyone on the trustee board. I know it's a lot of work dealing with the waterways issues. One question I remember raising is that the profile of the beaches in front of the bay have changed. We have sandbars, etc. So when you compute that the first 500 yards are X, etc., to allow for swimming, etc., that swimming condition has changed significantly by the sandbars. And also a second question that was raised at the beginning was, is there any way to look at the depth of the water? Because, people have to go further out to swim, assuming, again, the water is improved, but that people have to go much further out. And I'm concerned about the safety factors of, teenagers or, younger than obviously infants going out a little bit further. And we have mooring and boats coming, water vehicles going back and forth in that area. I know that it's a defined depth because, not depth, length that historically we've had, but we have like something I understand is like 1 in 100 year profile of a beach that most people have never seen before. So is that measurement accurate? And then secondly, is it safe given the realities of the bay? So that was one question. The last question was the depth, the different profile. And the last question I have is about the no dumping. I heard that there's a 3-mile no dumping, and that may tie into the state and national parameters. Do we have authority that anywhere within the Bay Area that's near to Sag Harbor's shores that we can monitor or provide oversight and perhaps penalties if people actually dump? That's my question. And I won't go into how do we monitor this and prevent it. I think that's probably for a later conversation, but that's still on my mind. How do we become more strict in the way we monitor and oversee dumping? So my questions are depth, water. Okay, good.
Thank you. So the first part is the beach itself and the swimming area. And so the swimming area off of there only leads to the resident moorings. So it can go out further if you want to take less of the resident moorings, but that is measured from I would assume low water, but I don't know that for a fact. John, do you know where the measurement is?
Well, I mean, the chart was made up on a certain date, and they measured 500 feet basically from the shoreline or the mean high water mark at that date. It hasn't been adjusted for drastic changes, and frankly, in front of Nineveh Beach, for instance, if we were to adjust that, we'd be adjusting it, every few months because it's essentially changing rapidly right now. So I think that's something that we have to look at in the future, see what settles down, see if the outlet of Little Northwest Creek, if it is changed, and that may cause the shoreline to settle into a more stable condition. But I would just say that swimming, we have an area within 500 feet where there's a 5 mile an hour zone. There can be swimming anywhere in there. It's not limited, and hopefully the 500 feet is far enough out that you get some depth of the water that you can swim.
And the buoys have been put out already. Those buoys, and then the 1,500 feet buoys will go out in the coming weeks as soon as this is approved. So if those buoys don't look right to you from the beach, in the places where the beach has changed, by all means, let us know and we can have that conversation.
Yeah, I would presume, and Denise, maybe you could correct me on this, but I would presume that you could move those buoys if 500 feet is no longer where it used to be. So that it was correct in terms of the current geography. It might raise an enforcement issue at some point, but I think the safety is more important. So that's something to look at if people are having to go out to swim that far out. And I know that 500 feet, by the way, I mean, I've been 500 feet out from shore and it'd be up to my waist. So that it's not necessarily deep enough water for everything you'd like to do. In regards to the no discharge, if I can add, again, you have a no discharge zone, state, federal, and village, which goes out to a line between Orient Point and Montauk Point. You then have a 3 mile limit within which vessels with certified treatment systems, certified by the Coast Guard, can discharge within that zone. Vessels that do not have a certified treatment system can only discharge beyond the 3 mile limit. In other words, they would have to go out beyond Montauk Point to discharge. The enforcement locally, and one of the reasons for changing the language a little bit was so that the village would have enforcement power and wouldn't have to rely on the state or the DEC. And there is a provision, as I said, that the village shall come up with rules and procedures for enforcement. It may be a schedule of inspections, et cetera, so that we have some handle on that. And I know Aidan has some feelings about that.
All right. Thank you, John. Thank you, Renee. I don't know why my speaker is going crazy. So let's move on. And now this is the Sag Harbor Village Waterfront Overlay District regulations. We are not going to introduce this law tonight, but we are going to talk a little bit about it. It is up on our website, the new code, the new uses table, and we are going to talk about it, and then we are going to have 2 question and answer sessions before our next board meeting where we will introduce the law. Those will be next Monday at 6 p.m. and the following Monday at 3 p.m. And these are, again, question and answer. It's not public hearing, it's really clarification. So I'm going to turn it over to Tim McGuire, who as chair of the zoning committee is one of the people who came to us and said, we need this. And so Tim, take it away, please.
Thank you. I've got about 30 minutes worth of comments, but
Great.
I boiled it down to 30 seconds. I just want to point out to the trustees and to the public that since we started working on some amendments and additions to our existing zoning code that would give us a better ability to make sure that the developments that we saw coming in our general waterfront area would benefit the community. We've had a lot of input, both from trustees, and also we've met with various groups around the village so that the form-based code that we initially proposed is quite different from what we have now. I think it's improved in many ways. And so if you think you know what it is, you should be sure to go to the village website and check what's there now. And it's especially been changed and improved by changes in uses. I just want to review from the standpoint of my position as chairman of the zoning board, just 4 simple things, and they're not technical, about the form-based code that everyone in the village will recognize and appreciate. The first is that the code will require that street level of new buildings will be windowed. Pedestrians will not face blank walls as they walk around, as they do now when they walk by 2 West Water Street or the Billy Joel residence on Bay Street. These storefronts also will be flood proofed, which means that where we used to think that in order to meet FEMA flood standards, we had to raise buildings. In this area, we won't allow buildings to be raised to meet FEMA standards. Instead, the ground floor will need to be flood proofed. And this technology is used elsewhere on Long Island, and it's been accepted by FEMA. The third thing is that we want to encourage developers of these properties to provide public access to the water side of their properties by offering a 1-story height bonus. So instead of being limited to 2 stories, they could add a 3rd story with a setback, but they would have to provide a walkway or something that we would specifically delineate in the code to offer pedestrian access. So for example, there's no pedestrian or village access to 2 West Water Street. Under this code, there would be. The dream that some of us have is that there would be a walkway that would begin at Havens Beach, extend through Cor Maria, go all the way along the waterfront, around the wharf, under the bridge, and end somewhere beyond, probably go all the way over to B Dock, which is well beyond the Beacon Restaurant, for those not familiar with it. And I think that's an achievable dream. The fourth thing is that as we're walking by the waterfront, we want to open up a water view to pedestrians so that you're not closed in by buildings. In the case of 2 West Water Street, we did separate the buildings so that there are 2 separate buildings with a space between. We had hoped that we would offer a water view through there for various technical reasons. That didn't happen, but there is a sky view between the buildings. In the future, we would ensure that pedestrians who walk by the buildings would be able to look all the way through and see the water. And also between buildings, view sheds, just to extend that thought, there will be view sheds between buildings, not necessarily multiple buildings on one lot, but between buildings owned by different people. They will have to provide a view shed. So I just wanted to provide those 4 things. There are many more technical things that I think will add to our existing code. The code's not being thrown out. This is an addition to it. And as the waterfront gets developed, and we had no idea when we began this that it was going to happen quite as fast as it is. I had described it as an emergency 9 months ago, and nothing had happened. So if it was an emergency then, what is it now? So thank you.
Thank you, Tim.
Thanks, Tim.
Kathy? Tom Gardella cannot unmute himself. Can someone unmute him? Tom, you're live. Do you have something to say now that you're unmuted?
Only that I told you it was going to take more than 6 months to do this. When we first were told it was going to take 6 months.
Yeah, I remember.
I don't, we'll see where we go from here. I mean, there's still a lot of questions.
Could I just add one thing? From my viewpoint, this doesn't seem like a very major addition to our existing code. And in fact, in my heart of hearts, I want it to go much further. I think if you really dig into this, most of it is pretty obvious to me and isn't that significant a change. And a lot of it, to the average citizen of Sag Harbor, I think would just be common sense. Thank you.
First of all, thank you for that very good summary. I've been asking for a while, and Kathy is here as well. hope to see for information the next couple of weeks. I've asked for a report after old and new rendering, just verbal descriptions of 7 critical properties that very much that we get some descriptor about existing code and how any change would appear under the new code. Kathy and I spent time on this, and I'm very grateful for the time we spent. I'm hoping that that presentation of all 7 of those sites that we've discussed, because they're subject of much major interest, could be part of what we get into next week.
Jim, that Kathy has been working very hard. Unfortunately, Taylor, who many of you met on all these meetings, has been ill the past few days, so it has not moved as fast as we would want, but that is in the works. We're going to share one version with you in the next, either tomorrow or Friday at the latest, and see if it is what you're looking for. It is very time consuming to do this, so we're working on it. We will get something to you as soon as we can. But Taylor being out, just put one more of the money monkey wrenches into all of it. So can we? But it is being worked on, and we may not get all 7 done.
I think
Jim, I don't know.
Well, I think we need enough. The most common question I get from the public. The most common question I get from the public is to compare the two. So
yes.
As much of that as we can have for those information meetings, I think would help. And I'm sorry to hear about Taylor. I hope she's all right. And Kathy's been terrific to work with on this. So thank you.
So Kathy, can we get Kathy unmuted?
There we go. Hi, everybody. Okay, so to answer your question, Jim, yes, we have been working on that one sample. We're all hopeful Taylor's going to be okay. She has been instrumental in getting a lot of the work done. And so having her out has been a problem, but we're all just very worried about her too. So I do have a sample for you that I will circulate by the end of the week. The other thing that we've put together is a comparison that Taylor had started with the check marks and the X's previously, and we've expanded upon that. So I will be sharing that as well in our Q&A sessions, and I will circulate to the Board of Trustees beforehand as well. I just wanted to, for tonight, to just let you know that the overlay that was posted to the website this weekend had some minor changes. They were the use table was updated. We removed the boutique hotel. We also included a reduction in the number of retail uses in the office district, and many of them were included as special exception uses now. So those will be limited to 1,500 square feet. So that's a pretty small size. And then we also, for everyone to be able to compare, we updated the comparison table on the website to show the existing code and the recommended code. So that's on the website. The other thing that we did was updated the map for clarity because the colors were a little too close in the past. So it made it confusing that the waterfront, underlying waterfront and the VB district were a little close. So, but for the most part, we are going to provide something that is going to talk about how this code meets the vision that was the first part of this project that the Form-Based Code Institute worked on with us, is to identify the vision for the waterfront, and then a zoning, and looked at the zoning diagnostic as where the current code might not be meeting those goals. So, you know, preserving the public views of the waterfront is and of the water is definitely a goal that has come through in the LWRP. It's something that's come through in prior planning efforts. but there is not a mechanism right now for that in the current code. So that is 20% of any waterfront lot will be required to have visual access. I mean, that's just, that's just right in the code. And then, as Tim had said, so the height limit will be exactly what it is now for sites that are south, and it's actually not as, it's not just sites that are south of Bay Street and Long Island Avenue, West and Water Street. There's actually some parcels that are on the south side of Bay Street will have a maximum of 25 feet unless they are permitted the height bonus to go up to 3 stories and to get to that 35 feet. And that would require public access easement. So we've talked about some of those things. That's something that's not in the code now. Right now, you could go to 35 feet as the, that's the maximum limit in the underlying districts now. The other thing is that having a condominium use on the waterfront is something that is permitted on the upper floors and in the office district. So that would no longer be permitted. So I think that what we aim to communicate with the public in the next couple of meetings is through this Q&A is how this is achieving the goals for the waterfront. And it's not something to be afraid of. It is definitely different, and it's much more visual. But I believe that this actually will help the village achieve their goals. So I just want to share my screen just so that way everybody has it in front of them. Well, I have the schedule here. Is that tonight is the Wednesday 28th. So we have a Q&A session at 6 p.m. on Monday, May 3rd. That Zoom invite will be posted to the website, I guess tomorrow, if not Friday. And then the second Q&A session will occur at 3 p.m. on the following Monday, May 10th. Here is the area, again, just as a visual. So that's all I have.
Thank you. Are there questions at this point? Again, we do have these meetings set up for deep dive questions, but if there are overall questions from anyone. All right.
I would just like to comment that along with Tim, that this is really hasn't gone that far. And it is a step forward though in controlling particularly the heights of buildings in this zone. There's a lot of focus on the use table, which is legitimate, but the big impact of this and the initial focus was on trying to keep the buildings lower, and if they do get higher, provide amenities, and if they do get higher, step backs for the 3rd floor, thereby decreasing their visual impact. And the uses is another thing that they haven't really changed too much, but that is something clearly that people can go through the chart and see. Well, let's not forget the part that the physical dimensions of the buildings are really a large part of this. That's it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. All right. So there is no motion needed on this. We will move on to the last, which is a local law to amend Chapter 205 property maintenance of the Sag Harbor Village Code to prohibit the planting and maintenance of bamboo on properties located within the village of Sag Harbor. This was a request that was made by our new building inspector, Jim Esposito. It is something that we've talked a lot about, but we, as we were doing the clear cutting law and everything else. So we thought this was a good time to bring it in. And is there anything else, Denise, that you want to add to this coming in, or you're muted? Yep. Kelsey, can we unmute Denise? Thank you.
Thank you. No, actually, that was perfect. Perfect summary. The building inspector had brought this to our attention almost as soon as he had started his new position here. And we have received at least one letter so far from a constituent asking for a prohibition on bamboo as well. It does have the potential to wreak havoc for neighbors when it grows uncontrolled, but also, gives itself the opportunity to destroy our sidewalks as well. So there are many reasons why we would want to regulate this particular invasive species. And so that was the impetus behind drafting the legislation.
Great, thank you. Can I get a motion to introduce?
Make a motion.
Thank you. Can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thank you.
I think you had one other local law, Mayor, that was number 3. It's adding the 30-minute parking stalls on Longworth.
Sorry. I was trying to get us through and it snuck by. Local law amending chapter 265 to add the limited during certain hours, 30-minute. It's broken up in a weird way, so I can't really read it, but what this is 4 spots. It's the first 4 spots on Long Wharf, and these will be free 30-minute parking spots. 4 free 30-minute parking spots on Long Wharf for people who just are running in to get anything, given that we will start the paid parking in mid-May on Long Wharf.
Yep. And these, Mayor, will operate just like the 8 30-minute spots that have proved to be very popular on Main Street. So it's just extending that facility to the north end of Main Street and Long Wharf.
Yes.
I'll make the motion.
Thank you.
A quick question. You still have to check in with.
No, on these you do not.
No.
These 4 are completely.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. So just to reiterate, we will be having public hearings on the waterways, on the beaches and parks, on the bamboo. Do we have to have a local hearing on this parking spot as well? I mean, a public hearing on this parking spot. So we will be having all those public hearings at our next board meeting, which is May 11th. We also will, at that time, we certainly hope introduce the waterfront zoning for public hearing and everything else. So, incredibly, it is time for public comments. And if there are public comments that we have not on a subject that we have not discussed, not to do with any of the laws that we will be having public hearings on or anything else, if you can raise your hands. And we do have a very strict 3-minute limit on those public comments. But at the moment, I do not see any, unless I'm missing something. Okay. So we can move on to correspondence requiring action. The first is an authorization to approve the salary schedule for the 21-22 fiscal year.
I'll make the motion.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The second resolution is to adopt the budget for the general fund, and I need to clarify something before we get into the budget. Last week or 2 weeks ago at the end of the budget presentation, we were asked what the tax rate will be. And Tim and I were mistaken. So I just want to clarify that the tax rate for the proposed fiscal year will be 2.7322. Now, if that means anything to anybody, you're better than I am. But if you have a house assessed at $1 million in 2020, you paid $2,701.02 for every $1 million. In 2021, you will pay $2,732.18. So it is a $31.16 difference for every $1 million that you are assessed, which comes out to a 1.15 difference or increase.
I make the
So,
motion. I'll make the motion.
thank you.
And I'll second that. I'll congratulate everybody on keeping us under the cap. I think that was a remarkable achievement considering the year that we've had.
Thank you.
Agreed.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Jim?
Okay. Thank,
Yeah, I said aye.
Okay, thank you.
excuse me, Mayor, I apologize. We do need a roll call vote for that as well.
Okay. So,
Yes. Agree. Aye.
thank you.
Trustee Corish says aye.
Corish, trustee Plum,
Okay.
trustee LaRocca,
Aye.
the mayor, yes. Thank you. The next is to adopt the budget for the sewer fund. I assume we need a roll call for this as well. Can
That's
I get a
correct.
motion?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Thank you. Trustee, Deputy Mayor Gardella, how do you vote?
Aye.
Trustee LaRocca, how do you vote? I'm taking that.
Aye.
Thank you. Trustee Corish, how do you vote?
Aye.
Trustee Plum, how do you vote?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Thank you. And Tim, thank you very much for all the hard work you did on this and really creative thinking and everything else. And to all the department heads, thank you, because I know it was a lot of work and, you know, budget time is never fun, but everybody was really good about thinking about what they really needed and how we can move forward. So thank you all. Thank you to the trustees to work with each of the department. The next one is the authorization to accept the annual audit report for the village prepared by Sadi Levine and Siaco CPAs for the fiscal year ending May 31, 2020.
I'll make the motion.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Authorization to accept the annual audit report for the Justice Court.
I didn't see this.
Jim, we can't hear you or see you. We just see your
Am
head. No, you're not muted. You're just.
Okay,
You're breaking up.
all right, on the audit,
Yes.
can you hear that? Okay,
Yeah.
on the audit, I don't know, you can't hear me?
No, we can hear you.
Okay, I wonder if we could put the audit forward to the next meeting. I only saw it for the first time this afternoon, and I actually read these things. I don't know when it was distributed. Was it distributed earlier?
It was. Beth, you're now muted. It was distributed earlier and we did have a review of the report on a day early, on Monday, I guess it was. I don't even,
That's correct.
we did have a review with the auditors on Monday that everyone was invited to. So yes, it was distributed last weekend.
But that was.
I apologize. Tuesday was the
24
review.
hours, no.
Yeah,
Yes, it was.
that's true.
Was there a review yesterday at 11 a.m.?
Yes.
Yes.
Right, but it was, notice went out on.
Yeah,
My
Jim,
only comment is, was it out of yesterday's meeting for any length of time?
Jim, we can't hear you. You're breaking up. I can't get a full sentence. No.
All right, okay.
All right, Beth, can we table it or
Yeah.
do we need to vote on it?
Well, I can notify, we do have to notify Moody's. We can. Yeah.
Then just go ahead and check it off.
I'm sorry, I don't know.
I don't know where we are on this right now.
I don't either. Are we voting on it or are we telling Moody's that we're not and going to postpone it?
Don't postpone it, I think Jim's saying. Is that
Don't
correct?
postpone it.
I think you say don't postpone.
Okay, thank you.
Don't postpone, keep the schedule.
Okay. So can I get a motion to approve? Or I don't know, maybe we got a motion to approve and
I'll make the motion.
thank you.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. And we need the same for the Justice Court, a motion to approve the audit for the Justice Court.
Although,
I thought we just did that.
We just did.
So did I. We just had the same vote.
All right, okay, we did it, okay, again. Our next item in that case is Austin McGuire, Chief of Police, requests authorization to hire Lavelle Cruz as a TCO at a rate of $17 per hour effective 4/30. Can I get a motion?
I make the motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Authorization to sign the East End Ambulance Coalition Agreement.
I'll make the motion.
Thank you.
Second.
All in favor?
aye.
Aye.
A resolution to establish a capital reserve fund to be known as the 21st Century Infrastructure Capital Reserve Fund. This fund will be created by the monies realized by public parking.
Make the motion.
Thank you.
Second.
You, all in favor?
Aye.
Oh, time out. Sorry, Jim. I got it. And I see the hand signals. I don't hear the voice.
Okay, this one put 2 weeks forward, May 11th.
Okay.
Can I ask why, Jim?
Yeah.
Because we still, if you can't hear me, I can't explain.
So what are we doing now? Can we clarify what we're doing?
Just put it on to the regular meeting.
Why, though?
I don't know if Jim can hear me, but at the last meeting, he had a question about your discussion in the beginning about reviewing this at the end of the year. I think there was a question about the date or when you were going to review the paid parking fund. But this resolution that I prepared only deals with the capital reserve. It only establishes the capital reserve fund. It doesn't address when the trustees would look at paid parking again.
I understand.
I don't see why we have to postpone this. I just don't.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
You can. Okay.
Yep.
All right. The reason was I thought when we brought this back, we would put in a sunset date for the authorization of this program to be a year hence. And to do that, I understood we had to do it not only in the underlying authorization to do pay, we're doing it for only the one season. We have a review for the season, and that needed to be reflected here in the fund, otherwise indefinitely into the future. And
I didn't
that's
understand. Sorry.
my colleagues, that's back to.
All right. I think
one of the things we said, it wasn't going to be a sunset, it was going to be a review. And secondly, we agreed, I thought that 12 months hence was too close to next year's season. So if we're going to review this, we were going to review it in January, February, March, when we had enough time and enough data to review. But reviewing this 1 year from now doesn't leave us in a good position to reintroduce it for next summer. So, and the idea that there was an automatic sunset is something that I thought we had decided was not going to be, it was just going to be a review. And then we would decide then whether we wanted 2022. And that was my understanding.
That's what my notes reflect from your original discussion. That the majority of the board did not agree to a sunset provision, but agreed to revisit the whole concept of paid parking before next season.
Yeah.
enough time to make a decision for next season. Jim, you're now muted. which is not going to help matters.
Well, we could still vote. I don't know. I don't want to cut you out, but
All this
I
resolution.
I did not mute myself, I know.
Can't hear him.
Jim, maybe you could turn your video off and then your audio would work better because it won't be as much of a drain on the internet. Could you try that?
Can I ask Denise a question? Does this, what we're voting on, does that just establish the fund? It
Yes.
doesn't have anything to do with the review or the sunset? It's separate?
No. Nope.
Just
No.
establish the fund.
Jim?
This
That
just
was just-
establishes the fund, and, allows you to, once the money comes into the general reserve, to then put it into this dedicated capital reserve. And the resolution then spells out how that money can be spent so that anyone who's concerned that the income from paid parking is going to go toward some other, village cost can be assured that that's not the case.
I'd like to go ahead and just make this motion.
Well, I made the motion and you seconded it. So,
I'll
Can
second it.
anybody hear me now?
yes.
Can
Yes.
you hear me?
Yes, we can, Jim.
Okay. I had some edits to this, but I will stand down on this. It's not what I intended. And I thought the language is limiting in terms of what infrastructure we would use and so forth. So I misunderstood completely. I thought we were going to take some notes when this was on the schedule 2 weeks ago. Unless there's some compelling reason why it has to be done tonight, I would ask that we do it 2 weeks from today.
What are we going to change from? I don't understand when we come back in 2 weeks, what changes we are expected to make. If someone can explain that to me, maybe it would be easier for me to agree with you, Jim.
All right, I saw this as a draft. This is the reserve fund. I marked it up. I thought that's what we were doing tonight. If we're not doing that tonight, I stand down. If there's a reason we have to do it tonight, these work sessions have become regular meetings. So I prepare them as I would for a regular meeting. I thought that's what we were doing. Clearly, I made a mistake. So if you want to enact it this way, I'll join you, but it's not what I understood. And I thought the language in particular about infrastructure could be better. There's controversy about what constitutes infrastructure. I just wanted to be clear so these funds could not wind up on some unrelated matter. But that's the legislative assistant in me. And so if everybody's satisfied that this, I don't know why I'm waving it around, you can't see it. But if this is, everybody's comfortable with it, I stand down and we'll vote with it.
I am, for one.
I'm very comfortable with the way the law is written at the moment.
I'm comfortable with it.
Tom?
I made the motion. Aiden seconded.
Okay. Can I get a vote?
I mean, I understand Jim's concerns, but we already moved.
Aye.
Aye.
Moved on this.
Jim, are you
Aye.
voting aye or are you,
I said I would vote aye and I'm voting aye.
okay, thank you. I just didn't hear you. All right. Moving on to the Sag Harbor Village election, 2001 election inspectors. This is to hire inspectors for the June 15th election. Can I get a motion?
So
I'll make
moved.
the motion. I'll second it.
All in favor?
Second.
Aye.
Aye.
This next one breaks my heart to read, but I promised I would not make a speech.
Thank you.
Authorization to accept the resignation of Denise Schoen as village attorney effective April 30th.
Oh,
I cannot let it go though without saying that Denise will be still part of the waterfront zoning. She will still be our planning attorney, and she will still be on other special projects, including the LWRP. So she's not really leaving.
Just switching.
This is like Hotel California.
Exactly.
Well, Denise, we thank you. I'd like to thank you for everything you've done and all the help you've given me over the last 2 years. It's been enormous, and it will stay with me for the rest of my life. And I really appreciate all of your input and your humanity and your integrity, and look forward to working with you again in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Denise.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Denise. Thank you for all your hard work, and we will miss you, even though you're still staying around. We're gonna miss
I
you.
appreciate it. Thank you. Yep, I will definitely be available to help. So I'm not going anywhere.
All right, I will regretfully make that motion myself.
I'll second it.
Thank you. All not in favor, but in
Aye.
favor. Aye. The next resolution is to appoint Elizabeth Vale as the village attorney effective May 1. This will be, Liz Vale was our attorney for many years, and Liz is going to be a wonderful addition to this team, and we look forward to getting her back up to speed, and know that Denise will be there to help her in anything that she can. Can I get a motion, please?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you.
And welcome back, Liz.
Welcome back, Liz.
All in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Hi, Liz.
Hi, Liz.
Liz.
Thank you. Nelson Pope Voorhees recommends that Howald Landscaping be awarded the bid for the Cove Road and Amherst Road projects in the amount of $94,999. These are rain gardens and bioswales to go at the end of Cove Road and Amherst on Redwood to help with flooding issues. Can I get a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you.
Second.
You, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And Christ Episcopal Church requests authorization to plant a community garden at 5 Hampton Street. That is our CPF fund mini park on 114.
I'll make the motion.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. One other thing I want to remind everybody, tomorrow night at Kathy, 6 o'clock. 6 o'clock, we have an LWRP public hearing. We have been on COVID pause for LWRP for a while, but we are moving forward. We have a lot of work to do, and the LWRP, for those of you who don't know, is the local waterfront revitalization plan. It is another key part and one of the building blocks of our overall strategic plan for the village. It is how we keep our waterfront safe, and we had obviously a lot of talk earlier about our waterfront. The LWRP is a key part of that as well. So please join us for that. The Zoom information is online.
And can I add one thing?
Sure.
It is a workshop. So there is an activity that's part of it. We'll be having breakout groups for people to provide input on different aspects of the quality of life in Sag Harbor. And these, the input that we receive will help us identify the aspects that are of value and that wish to be protected through the policies of the updated LWRP. So that's my little sales pitch. It will be fun. We'll try to make it fun.
It will be.
Thank
Great.
you.
All right. Can I get a motion to adjourn, please?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Good night. Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Good night. Thank you.
Well,
Bye.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome.